Hey everyone, welcome back to this episode of Wild and Unprotected. I'm your host, Koji Sumalde, and here's my co-host, Ethan Leaman.
Hey, Koji, thanks. Can you believe we're on our 10th episode? That's insane.
I can't believe it.
Well, 10 episodes strong. Let's dive into the intro. Hit it, Defrey and Sean.
I'm an elephant, I'm a sexy duck. When we get in one, I'm a rhino, I'm a hornet toad. Netherlands to Borneo.
There's always the classic just toss them overboard when you're sitting having lunch or, just anything like that.
The classic.
We actually were joking about setting up an OnlyFins account.
Here's to us all swimming through the shit and making more sense of it.
Wild and unprotected. Planet Earth, we can't neglect it. Nature sexy. We need this place, so please respect it.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is Will Gough from the Marine Mammal Research Program of the University of Hawai'i. Whew, gosh, I almost butchered that. Welcome to the show, Will.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you. So tell us a little bit about what you do for the Marine Mammal Research Program. We've had one of your coworkers before, Claire, on the show. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I am a postdoctoral fellow, postdoctoral researcher in the MMRP or MERP lab at University of Hawai'i. And so my main role is using tags. So small biologging devices. Biologging means they're these little, basically like a cell phone, but a little bit bigger, that stores all the data on it. It logs everything on the little tag. And so we put these out. They attach with suction cups. So we put them out on whales. We can put them out on seals. We can put them on turtles, sharks, pretty much anything. But the main focus for us is humpback whales in Hawaii, Alaska, and some other places around the world. So my job and my role is sort of helping train people how to work with this type of data and work with these type of tags to put them out, collect them, and really sort of analyze that data to figure out what humpback whales are doing underwater.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. We've had someone who works with tags on the show before, Dr. Ian Kerr with Ocean Alliance and Snotbot. So it's cool to see a different perspective from tagging research.
Yeah, I think they're deploying these tags from drones, which is super cool and sort of like new age, next gen technology. We're still using the slightly more old school way, which is from a small boat, and we have, I think it's like a 20-foot long pole out on the end of the boat that we deploy it on the whale from there. Little bit different in terms of the methodology for attachment.
So like a harpoon.
Yeah, it looks a little bit sketchy sometimes. We try to make sure that there aren't, whale watching boats sitting there with a bunch of tourists who are taking pictures of us as we look like we are stabbing a whale.
Yeah, you don't want to be Moby Dicking it.
Exactly. Everything is permitted, so it's all above board, but yeah, it doesn't look great sometimes.
I could imagine you just have this 20-foot long pole that you're swinging on back and just smacking the shit out of a whale. I can imagine that's probably not a great look, just trying to get those suction cups to work.
Yeah, not the best. Not the best.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, I could see, the rise in technology with drones and everything going on in that space. Could you talk a little bit about, some of the challenges that you're facing in your current role when it comes to tagging? And of course, there's always that interaction with, tourists and people that are watching. But what are some things that you might face internally that people may not know when it comes to this method of tagging?
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, there's definitely the sort of external piece that, whale watching boats and people around, it can look a little bit odd if you don't really know what's going on. But just in terms of sort of the methodology, right, we need to go out on this small boat, very small boat, like 20, 25 feet. And we need to get close to an animal. The animal needs to be cooperative enough to sort of let us get close. We need to deploy this tag, and then we need to let it stay on the animal. And typically they stay on for about a day, and then they pop off, and then the tag is floating and we need to recover it, which means we need to go back out and pick up the tag from wherever it's gotten to. And so in terms of Hawaii, the weather in Hawaii can be a little bit uncooperative sometimes. So you really need good days, and you need to have a good weather window where you sort of have like the lee of the island, like the shadow from the mountains, creating this area that you can actually work. And if the tag gets outside of that, then you really need to sort of go and maybe get a bigger boat or find a window where you can go out and collect this. And that can get pretty tough sometimes. So it's just sort of the logistics of when you're getting these tags on and back and actually collecting this data can be really challenging. And also just making sure that the animals are actually around. So we've been, one of the things we've been trying to do is tag a false killer whale, which for people who don't know, they're these small, they're called quote unquote blackfish. They're a dolphin species that's pretty rare. And what they like to do is sort of bomb around the Hawaiian Islands. They'll go from like island to island day by day.
Is that something you can actually say? Can you say bomb around the Hawaiian Islands and that be okay?
Ooh.
That won't trigger any PTSD, will it?
Ooh, yeah. Well, they race around the islands. Maybe that's a little bit better. Yes. So they race around these islands very fast in these straight lines. And so you basically need to be in the right spot at the right time to even find the animal. And then since the animals keep going, they pop off somewhere wildly different. So that's just when you're sort of in the field. And then you need to collect these tags, bring them back. You need to download all the data off them, which can take quite a bit of time because there's these big video, audio files. So you're sort of dealing with, which computers can you use to actually download all this stuff. And then you have to sit there and process through all the data to get it into a workable format that anyone can actually analyze anything and try to find anything out. So that's one scenario where I have started to drink coffee recently. And I was never a coffee drinker, ever. I never liked the taste, never thought it was very fun. And then somehow got through my entire PhD not drinking coffee, even though I was in a lab where we had a $2,000 espresso maker. And my PI was like convinced that if academia failed, he would open up a coffee shop. So he was like happy to make us coffee every day. And I still was like, nope, not going to do it. Not my thing. Don't need it. I'm fine. And then at some point about 6 months ago, I was at a coffee shop and I actually drank a coffee and was really productive for 2 hours and had the sad realization that I was more productive for those 2 hours. And so at this point, I have gotten on the coffee train, which helps with the data processing, but maybe not so much for my health from the coffee standpoint.
That's so funny. Coffee seems to be a topic of discussion lately. Koji and I we were having a discussion with another podcast guest yesterday about it. And I still have not made the commitment. I know it works for some people, just not for me. I like the smell. It smells like great. I'll go sit at a Starbucks and smell it, but that's about it. It doesn't do it for me. I think Koji probably has a different solution or a different workflow for him that gets him through the day when we're going through those slogs of editing. But what about you, Koji?
Yeah, I'm actually drinking coffee right now, but today's been a crazy day, guys. I started off pretty early, had a Celsius. That didn't help. And then went straight to a sugar-free Red Bull. Also didn't help. And then I found myself in Publix wandering around like a chicken with no head, like jittery. was like, all right, I'll go to Starbucks. So I got a coffee, and then I ate a big salad to kind of counterbalance it. But now I'm finally feeling at that point where I'm focused, and it's taken all day. Sometimes it takes that whole day to really kind of kick in, and that partly is probably because I'm dependent on caffeine. I definitely am dependent on caffeine. But yeah, I don't have a preference. I like all energy drinks. Sometimes I wean off coffee because I don't like sweaty palms. I don't know about you guys.
Oh no,
I
definitely
think
not.
I think I drank an energy drink once in college. I tried one. It was like a Monster or something like that, and I think I got about halfway through, and my hands started to shake, and I was like having a mild panic attack, and I was like, nope, can't do this anymore. And I don't think I've had one since.
Yeah, those are dangerous.
Could you imagine any of the animals that you study on an energy drink? Like, what would that do to a pilot whale, especially one that like races around the island? Could you imagine?
Be very jittery, very jittery. Yeah, they just be going faster.
Super
The
false
humpback
killer whale.
calves, yeah, the humpback calves that we work with are already pretty squirmy, and they're like moving around, and mom's just sort of sitting there on the bottom, and calf's like flipping underneath her and trying to get milk, and like doing little somersaults and cartwheels and breaching and everything. So you might just get even more amped up.
So that's literally like a puppy, a humpback calf.
Exactly. 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 Yep.
Wow, that's a great segue into our next segment here around conservation and humpback nursing. Um, can you kind of talk on your experience more when it comes to humpbacks and nursing humpbacks?
Yeah. So one of the projects that we've been working on recently for the last few years is putting these tags on humpback moms and calves, so mom calf pairs. So these humpbacks spend maybe 2/3 of the year on the feeding ground, which for these animals in Alaska, or these animals in Hawaii, is the feeding ground is up in Alaska. So they're up there for quite a while, and then they come down to Hawaii to breed and to have their calves and sort of wean their calves. So they hang out in Hawaii, mainly off of Maui, for about 3 months from January to maybe early April. And so while they're there, they're just kind of hanging out. They're really chill. They're close to shore. They're in sort of the lee of the island that I mentioned, that sort of shadow of the mountains, which makes them really easy to tag, which is great. And so we've been going out again on this little small boat, finding mom calf pairs and trying to put a tag on both of them, and specifically the calves, right? Because we're interested to know what are the calves doing underwater again, right? Like what's sort of the kinematics, which is just like the measurements of motion, right? So how often are these whales flipping around and turning, and how often are they just remaining stationary? How often are they traveling with mom? Because all of those different types of movement are going to have an energetic cost associated, right? So these animals are hanging out with mom and they're nursing, so they're gaining milk, right? So they're gaining energy from that, but then they're expending energy. So we really want to know sort of what's the balance of energy for these animals, right? Because that has a big impact on the health of the individual and also the health of the population. And so we can look at, how these animals are doing, and then potentially compare that to either humpbacks in different locations around the world, say in Australia, or other species, right? So, what's the calf of a right whale doing energetically versus the calf of a humpback, right? So we have, I think somewhere between 20 and 30 animals that we've tagged at this point. So we have this sort of growing data set. And one of the grad students in the lab, Gussie Hollers, has been doing a lot of really cool work, sort of starting to process and really analyze that data and get into it. So hopefully in the next few years, while she's, working through her PhD, there'll be some cool stuff that comes out of there.
What do you use that data for?
So like I said, it's mainly energetics, right? So if we, get a tag back, right? So it's been stuck on an animal for 12 hours. Most of the sensors that are in there are similar to ones that are in your phone. So you're going to have accelerometers, which basically determine sort of motion and orientation of the tag. You're going to have what are called gyroscopes, which are going to get you rotation in the different sort of cardinal axes. You're going to get magnetometers, which tell you the orientation relative to Earth's magnetic field. You're going to get depth in the water column. You're going to get light, temperature. You're going to get video camera. So really like 4K resolution video. You're going to get audio from a hydrophone. So you have all these different data streams coming in that are all time synced, right? So the idea is at a particular point in time, you can look and say, okay, so the animal was, pitching down 30 degrees and it was rolled 20 degrees to the left. And on the video camera, we can see that there was a fish in front of it. So it looks like maybe it was like rolling to look at this fish, or, occasionally the calves will open their mouth and sort of do almost like a seemingly like a mock lunge, like a engulfment lunge, like they're trying to feed, but they don't really feed in Hawaii, so we're not really sure what they're doing, but they're just kind of like playing around. Or you can see when the animal breaches, because you can see a really big spike in some of the different accelerometer measurements. So bringing all these data streams together, we can start to get a sense for, again, sort of how is the animal moving underwater? How is it moving in relation to mom if we've tagged both the mom and calf, right? So like who's moving more? We expect it's the calf, but how much? And then how exactly that quantifies into energy, right? Like if the animal is swimming at 2 meters per second for 20 minutes in a straight line, how much energy does that actually use? And we can quantify that.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about was, we have a bunch of scientific research out there, and I think one of the missing links to kind of the mainstream knowledge base of most people is, what do we do with that scientific information once we've captured it in a data set, we've mapped it out, we've seen, kind of the impact that it may have on the animal. What we do with it kind of from there. Are we doing it just to learn? Are we doing it to create programs that can conserve these animals? What are we kind of doing in that facet?
Yeah. So there's definitely a little piece of it, which is knowledge for knowledge sake type of thing, basic learning about these animals. But depending on the location, so in Maui, for example, there is a lot of whale watching pressure, boat pressure, which just means there's a lot of boats around these animals all the time, right? So it's sort of like a little buzzing in their ear, probably the majority of the day. So one thing you can do with these tags, and we can sort of look through the data set sometimes and try to figure it out, especially using the hydrophone, is figure out when are there boats nearby and what is the animal's response to those boats. So there's been some research done in other species and in other locations, and some of it more sort of controlled. They're called like controlled playback experiments, where what'll happen is you'll put a tag on an animal and then you will play a sound near them. A lot of times it's like military sonar or something like that, something really loud that they would be experiencing in their environment. You're sort of trying to get it in that controlled way. And then you can look at how the animal moves after that, right? Is it moving away from the sound source, or is it, does it stop feeding, or does it, change the depth that it's sort of hanging out at most of the time?
This is like lurch in pain. If the sound is too loud.
Yeah. Do you actually see like a sort of acute signature, right? Movement signature to when that sound happens. And it's not always clear, for different animals, what are those thresholds when the animal is going to react, and are they getting acclimated? over time. I think there's been some research in fin whales showing that the calls that the animal makes, if there's a lot of sort of ambient noise in their environment, they might change the structure of those calls. They might change the frequency or change the pitch range or something like that, so that they can sort of get around, some of that noise in their environment and sort of acclimate to it. So how that sort of happens in different species in different locations requires a lot of this data and sort of these bigger data sets to really see what's happening.
Okay, yeah, I think that paints a really good picture of what happens with that data and why you guys need to collect it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too how many devices you actually need to have. It's not just one linear device that's like, hey, here's all the data in one little package. You have cameras, microphones, all these things that you know show at one point in time an event that has happened. So I can imagine how much time that takes to process all of that.
That's why the coffee's needed.
Yes, that definitely takes a while. And I mentioned before that all the data streams are time synced. Well, they should all be time synced, but given that these are, in some cases not handmade, but they're like very new technology that is being iterated on, right? So certain tags, it might be that you put it out once and a whale hits it, right? Like you put it on a mom and the calf might come by and just scratch it or something like that. And all of a sudden you have like a scratch on the lens that you need to like deal with now.
Oh, mom, you got something on your back. Let me get that for you.
Exactly. And we've literally had that happen where one animal will be tagged and another animal, you'll kind of see it come in and like side eye it a little bit and then like try to hit it with a flipper.
Like the fuck is that?
Yeah, that happened with a pilot whale last year. Yeah. Or we had one where the tag popped off and then the animal sort of turned around, noticed that the tag was there, and then swam up and headbutted the tag. Like it was angry that it had just been on its back. But yeah, so, everything should line up. But again, sometimes these tags, they go through a lot of wear and tear. So sometimes the data you get back isn't perfect, right? And it's sort of different with every deployment. So that's a lot of the processing is sort of going through each individual tag deployment, like a little, individual baby that you have to sort of help nurture and get to the point where you can actually have it in a processed form that you can analyze.
Yeah. How much does one of these tags cost?
Oh, far too much. I think it's 10 to 12,000 for just the tag itself. And then in terms of recovery, we need to have 2 different transmitters. And so each of those transmitters, I think, is like 1 to 2,000. So it's on the order of 15,000 for one of these guys. And, you sort of put it on a whale and then you hope that you're going to get it back. And we haven't lost that many. We've been pretty good about it.
That many.
We've lost a handful.
It's like losing a handful of used cars.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. And the most heartbreaking is when you put it out and then you just don't hear anything from the tag again ever, and you have no idea what it's doing or where it's gone.
It just dies on the spot.
It just either the animal hits it off and it sinks for some reason. They're not supposed to sink; they're supposed to float. But they break the tag in some way and it's floating wrong, so the antenna aren't out of the water, so we can't hear it. Or the animal just flies 30 miles away and then pops it off there and we can't get to it. Or so there's a lot of ways that the animals can really kind of mess with us and make it hard for us to collect this data.
So what would you say the success rate is?
Our success rate
on recovering tags?
Ooh, I think our success rate is probably like 97, 98% in terms of recovery. In terms of number of deployments, I think if you include the tag deployments that we've done here in Hawaii and up in Alaska, and then if you include all of the deployments from my PhD lab, which was at Stanford in California, I think we probably have somewhere in the order of 600 to 700 tag deployments with these tags. And then there's some other projects which have been working on them.
You got a good team.
It's probably getting close to 1,000 tag deployments with these CATS tags, and
all with a big ass stick.
The majority, yeah, maybe like a few percentage points for drones at this point, but it's mostly with the big ass stick. Yeah,
we're gonna have to call Dr. Kerr. Dr. Kerr, can we get some snotbots on loan to MERP?
That would be really cool. It would be great for humpbacks. It'd be a little bit harder for false killer whales, I think, because the target that you're looking for is like this big, and you got to hit it perfectly. Which I think it might be hard if you're dropping something from a drone, which is high up in the air and trying to like get it in the right spot. But humpbacks, that'd be fine. That'd be great. But yeah, we tend to recover, like I said, the vast majority of these deployments. We've only lost, I think we've lost a few in Hawaii, a few in the Antarctic, and a few in California. And I think that might be it.
That's amazing. The rate of innovation, it feels like over the last, I would say 10 years in regards to technology is insane.
Yeah, for sure. I think this company that we work with, it's called Customized Animal Tracking Solutions, CATS. So they're CATS tags, which when you're trying to Google search CATS tags, looking for this device, it's always like little tags for cats, right? You know, it's never what you're looking for.
I feel like it could also go a lot worse too. Like there's people dressed up as cats.
That's true. You don't get too many of those with a safe search on, but that could happen as well.
Before we get too far into this week's episode, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsor. Our sponsor this week is you, our listeners. How? Well, now that we're a nonprofit, the donations that we receive go directly towards funding our shows. Want to help or need more information? Visit wildscapeproduction.com/donate to support the show. We're so thankful for the support. You make the show exactly what it is.
But yeah, so we work with this company, CATS, and I think they started development in like 2012, 2013, roughly. So it's been about 10 years that we've really been putting these tags out on whales. And I mean, if you look at the first tag that they developed, I mean, it's a little like foam brick with these goofy little suction cups on it. And it maybe had like a few sensors in there. I don't even know if it had a camera at that point. I think they were like developing the camera capability, but I don't think it had a camera. I don't know if it had a hydrophone. So it's just like this much more simple device that at this point is in the Stanford lab at the, we call it the Hall of Fame, which is just like a shelf in the lab with a little label that says Hall of Fame on it. It's a bunch of like broken tags
The shelf
from
of
way
fame.
back. Yeah, and that's typically the tag that we use for any sort of outreach with children. When we want to have someone practice tagging something, we'll bring out the big pole and we'll have a buoy, and we will take this old broken tag and we'll put it on the end, and we'll let kids like pick it up and like whip it at the ground repeatedly. So that's, the noble end for the first CATS tag.
That's wild. Some kid just beat the shit out of it.
Oh, they go hard. They're like all the way up in the air and like bringing it down hard and trying to hit the buoy and missing the buoy. And it's really cute, really fun to watch.
R.I.P. to history.
Right. But yeah, some of the, even the second and third and fourth and fifth and sixth tags were like very simple. They'll be whole different things where one will have like a little paddle wheel to try to capture the speed of the animal, or there'll be, different kinds of suction cups. And so it took a while to sort of develop the product that we have now. Yeah. And even now they're iterating. Like some of the newest tags, they have LED little headlights on them that turn on when the light sensor measures that it's really dark. And so the idea there is you can put it on something that's diving really deep and trying to figure out, how a pilot whale or a false killer whale, how they feed at depth. And you can hopefully actually see the prey in front of them. So that's kind of a new thing. That'd
be amazing for sperm whales.
Yeah. We haven't put one on a sperm whale yet, but that would definitely be a really cool avenue. And there are some sperm whales here in Hawaii. I think they're typically off of Kona, off the big island of Hawaii. But I mean, yeah, that would be amazing. People have tagged sperm whales, but with different tags. Typically they use, there's another sort of the other well-known type of tag is called the D tag. It's literally just like D, the letter D tag. And I think those were developed in the early 90s, maybe. And the main thing with those tags is the hydrophones. So they're set up to be, everything with the accelerometers and all that type of stuff, but then they have really, really good hydrophones in them to measure.
So more acoustic based?
Exactly. So they're used a lot for sperm whales, different dolphins and things like that use echolocation to hunt. Yeah.
That's awesome. So before we move on to our next topic, I actually, this chat on innovation to me is something I feel like is really cool. What are some, potential innovations that you can see, on the horizon, or even that you would want to see, that might impact conservation and scientific research here in the future?
Ooh, that's a good question. So if we're just focusing on whales, right? So the idea with whales is that most of the time, since you're having to find them out in the wild in their environment, you can't really control for anything. You can't put them in a tank.
I mean, you could. People just get really mad.
That it would have to be a very big tank, and it might not go well with marine protected areas or anything like that. But yeah, if you could really only get that one shot at putting a device on this animal, you can typically only do that one device, right? So everything needs to be enclosed in that one tag, and so that does limit you in a lot of ways, right? You sort of have one perspective on what the animal's doing. You have the perspective of that one tag for that one period of time. So, in terms of innovation, it's really how much can you fit into that tag? And so a lot of the things that I mentioned previously were big innovations because of sort of the rise of microprocessors and things like that. You can make things really, really small. You can make these inertial sensing, accelerometers and everything really, really small. And so now it's sort of, okay, we can put one tag on that stays in one location, potentially. They're suction cups, so they do slip around sometimes. But we can put this one tag on and we can kind of learn what we can from here. But what other sensors do we need? So one thing that would be great that, we have in certain tags, but not others, GPS, getting really, really good, really accurate GPS when the animal's at the surface.
That's wild, because you'd think that's like a must in every tag, especially for recovery.
So the way that GPS works, there are certain tags that do it really well, and certain ones that take a little bit longer. And so the GPS unit in the CATS tag works sometimes, but it doesn't work every single time. So it's, getting that like really dialed in will be huge, especially for these tags. And then sort of, more futuristic, if we could get we're working with suction cups right now. And like I said, it stays in one spot. If we could get a tag that actually moved around the animal, that would be amazing. It's super, futuristic, Black Mirror-y type of thing. But if you could get a little like roving tag that could like put it on the back and then it like moves up to the head and then it moves down to the tail and moves around the body. There are a lot of different things that, different variables that we can't really get from the back of the animal. So like heart rate is one thing, where we've developed these new tags where you can actually measure heart rate. So basically what it is, it has two little electrodes in two of the four suction cups. And so it can measure the voltage drop between even that small of an area. And it can use that to determine the heart rate. So, I think we've deployed that maybe a dozen times at this point, and I think like one deployment actually worked to get heart rate. And the reason was we put it on the back, but then it slipped all the way down underneath the left like arm pectoral fin, and just stuck there. And so that's pretty much where you need that electrode to be to measure heart rate. So if we could make a tag that actually could do that on command, that you could sort of put it up there and it knew enough to sort of move down, that would be amazing. That would get us a lot more data. Heart rate, which gets you physiology, which gets you energetics, which is big for conservation,
conversion
and,
rates,
again,
things like that.
Exactly.
I had a couple of ideas. It would be cool. One, to address kind of the GPS thing, to reach out and work with Starlink. So you had constant, positioning that was accurate. I mean, they're putting up more satellites than I think people know what to do with. So having a direct connection to a satellite cluster that's directly over, the islands would be amazing, and I think it would help. And then secondary, and I don't know if this has ever been thought of, and this might be, Black Mirror sci-fi, kind of what you thought about, but being able to test electrical impulses from the brain, just to see what kind of data mapping you could do from there from the start. I mean, if you had a tag, that had, 4 small fluctuating motors within the suction cups that could pull the suction cup off and allow it to slip, and move based on, different diving scenarios. I mean, you think about it, like if you get accelerometer data where the whale is climbing, you could automatically program those little motors in the suction cups to release and move down the whale, and, re-engage as it, it would be incredibly complex, but, a way to do it. If you had motors that would, push up and down to be able to release, you could do the same thing, as the whale was diving, catch that accelerometer data, suction cups pull up, whether partially or whatever it may be. So it keeps in contact with the whale and then re-engage, after a certain depth change or a certain metric. And then if you were to get close enough to the front of the whale or towards the head of the whale where the brain is located, be able to pick up those electrical impulses, and start to compare them with the audio and visual data to see, like, okay, what electric synapses are moving through this animal as it's going to eat, or as it's going to breach, or things like that. So that's where my mind had went, on innovation from the science side, is what could we use? And then, to further that and really go Black Mirror, if you really start to understand, how the whale's brain function works, could you reverse engineer that and send electrical impulses into the animal and almost control the animal's movements? And that's super Black Mirror. But I mean, anything is really, back and forth electrical currents, for impulse movements. I mean, that's how our muscles are controlled, very simply put, but, just crazy shit like that, I think, is what spurs innovation kind of in the future.
I like the idea of remote controlled whales that we can use to fight illegal fishermen. Yep. I like that.
Just imagine.
I like that. Basically, like Avatar 2. Yeah, exactly.
It's got a headset on, just sending electrical impulses. You just get flipper smacked. Bow!
Right. It's mentioning brainwaves. There actually has been some research done using biologging, but essentially in seals, so elephant seals. There's a postdoc at Scripps. Her name is Dr. Jessica Kendall Barr. And so for her PhD work, she did a lot of really, really cool stuff where she developed a little head cap for an elephant seal that could measure brain waves. And so they would put that on, and then they would put a normal little tag on, and then the animal would go out into the water. And what she was interested in measuring was sleep patterns. So when do the animals sleep, and what does that even look like? So she could actually measure the brain waves and see when the animal was in REM sleep. And then she could compare that to what the animal's doing. So they basically do this little like falling leaf pattern where they just like spiral down while they're asleep, and then they wake up and come back up.
Those are some ugly animals, by the way. I love all animals, but goodness gracious, those things are ugly.
and seeing them on the beach, they're all fighting with each other and trying to mate with each other. And the little babies, the little sausages are just like sitting there getting pummeled and getting fallen on. And yeah, one of my lab mates during my master's was doing some work on elephant seals. And so they got to go out to Año Nuevo beach in California. And apparently if you were working with the mom, let's say, and you had a little baby there, it was someone's job to just sit on the pup and make sure that it didn't move away. So someone would just sit there on the pup, make sure it didn't move, and then they could all work with mom. But the little pup would be screaming and just like vocalizing and going crazy. And they're very weird animals.
What did you do today at work? Oh, I sat on a little turd seal.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. And we've been working with the Hawaiian monk seals out here too, trying to put tags on them. And even those little guys, the babies are so goofy looking. They're just little sausages. We call them little shark sausages. They're just really weird, but really cute too. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of Hawaii, I think that's a good transition point. We know you didn't spend, your entire career so far in Hawaii. So, tell us a little bit more about kind of the past, where you are from, originally, and your life and experience to get to where you are now, because I would say you're kind of at the peak where most people would want to be in your profession.
Yeah. So I definitely did not start out wanting to be a researcher or, doing any kind of research. To my mind, growing up, research was, sitting in a wet lab with a pipette. And I remember I did that in chemistry class and couldn't follow a single thing that they were trying to explain to me. And it was not my thing. But I always really liked animals. So growing up, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a vet. I want to be a vet. And so I wanted to be a vet all the way up through, I think it was starting my junior year of undergrad. And so that year, I had a sort of very serendipitous, encounter with one of my professors that I had my freshman year. And I had taken her course. It was called vertebrate function, vertebrate function and anatomy, or vertebrate functional anatomy. And I had really liked the course. It was really cool, but I kind of just, I was a little freshman. I didn't really know what I was doing. So I kind of sat in the back and I think I probably fell asleep through half the lectures. I just tried to be engaged, but I was doing too much that year and just so I didn't really think that she would have known who I was, or really remember me, but I was walking through a parking lot and she was walking next to me, Dr. Betty McGuire. And, she turned to me at one point and goes, "Oh, hey, Will, how's it going?" I kind of was taken aback. I was like, "Oh, how do you remember me? Like, how do you know?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm starting up a research program. If you're at all interested in, trying out research, doing anything like that." I was like, "Oh, I don't really know what that means, but sure, why not? Sounds great." So I went and talked to her and she's like, "Oh, we're going to go, my goal is to go to the local dog shelters. And what I really want to know is sort of hormone composition, things like that, basically urinary behavior of dogs, domestic dogs, right? So the goal is, let's go to the local shelters and walk the dogs. And whenever the dog pees, we can, score some behavior about that urinary event." And I was like, that sounds kind of crazy, but also really fun because I get to just go to the dog shelters and walk the dogs. Great. So we did that for about 2.5 years, I think, where we would go. I think we probably walked over 200 dogs from the local shelters. And we would just, one person would have the leash and they'd be walking the dog. The other person would have a clipboard and a little pen. And every time the dog peed, if it lifted its leg, you would score which leg it lifted and which position it used or which posture it used. And, different aspects, how many times the dog peed in a walk, did it poop? And if it pooped, did it ground scratch after it pooped? And if it ground scratched, which leg did it use? So all of these different aspects of dog urinary behavior. which, I would talk to my friends who were also, if they had gotten into doing little research projects too, they'd be like, oh, I'm studying, the wetlands and like frogs in the wetlands, or I'm studying birds and it's, flying behavior of birds. And I'm like, oh, I'm studying peeing behavior in dogs. That's kind of goofy, but I love it. So that was my first research project, and it was amazing. I loved it. It was so fun. And while I was doing that, I had the opportunity to TA her course, Dr. McGuire's course. And one of the other TAs, one of the grad students, she was about to start up a little research project of her own with another professor who I had taken a course with. His name was Dr. Frank Fish, and he studied locomotion in anything that swims. Everything from
perfect name,
muskrats up
by the
to
way.
whales. Yeah, he has the perfect name for it. So she was starting up this project looking at the escape behavior of ducks. These big marine ducks called eider ducks, common eider ducks. And so essentially what they had done is they had gone out to a little marine station off the coast of New Hampshire called Shoals Marine Lab. And they had gone out on a small little Zodiac boat, and they had Stacy, Dr. Stacy Farina was the grad student at the time, now a professor at Howard University. She was on the front of the boat with a high-speed camera, and Frank was driving the boat. And they would find a big flock of eider ducks, and they would zoom at the eider ducks and try to sort of get them to escape. And so as they would escape away from the boat, they would take high-speed video of them escaping, because these are essentially really big, fat, heavy ducks that can't really fly, or they can't fly very well. So if they're startled, they don't just fly away, and sometimes they'll sort of sink underwater, but a lot of times they'll just run along the surface. So we were interested in how that works. So she had all this data, and she's like, oh, I need a grad student an undergrad or someone to help me analyze this. And I was like, well, I'm already doing one research project, and that's fun. So why don't I do another one? So I got into working on that one as well. I would spend 2 days a week going to the shelters and walking the dogs, and then I would come back and sit in a room for a few hours looking at videos of ducks. And it was great. And so that was sort of my junior and senior year of undergrad. So I really, really enjoyed that. That was really fun. And so when I graduated, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had really enjoyed research, but I didn't really have a background or know, do I want to do grad school? How do I even apply to grad school? Like, what's the whole process here?
Yeah, no one tells you that, by the way. Like, if you want to continue your education, everyone's just like, oh, congrats, you graduated from, your undergraduate degree. If you want anything else, you're on your own.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, so I was sort of talking to people a little bit. Like, I was talking to Dr. Fish a little bit. I was like, I don't really know what I want to do, where I want to go. And he's like, well, if you want, you could come down to Pennsylvania, to Westchester University of Pennsylvania. And you could be a master's student here. You could be my master's student. I was like, oh, I like research. Research has been fun so far. I'll just keep doing this. I'll just, stay in school forever and do research. So I did that. So I followed him down to Pennsylvania, and I joined his lab. And so he was looking at the swimming behavior of dolphins. So one of the things we would do is we would go to the aquariums. So it was mainly the National Aquarium in Baltimore. At the time, they had, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 dolphins that they had in captivity there. And we would set up cameras. We'd set up high-speed cameras and sort of like a little 3D array of cameras. And we would film the dolphins as they were just swimming past the glass. And so we had, this data of animals swimming. And so we were kind of analyzing that, looking at the motion and how that relates, again, to sort of energetics and things like that. But we also had some anatomical pieces from stranded animals that had died. So we had some tails from different dolphin species. And so I was looking at that one day, sort of early on in my master's. I was like, oh, there's a sort of interesting structure in the tail with this anatomy that they don't really have any bones leading out into the flukes, those little sections that go off from the middle of the tail. But it's still really rigid, and they can, flap them up and down and really get some thrust out of it. So I took that on as my master's project, really kind of digging into the anatomy of that. So I was, looking at swimming in dolphins, but also really looking at kind of the anatomy and morphology and structure and things like that. And that was all really fun. And so that was a 2-year program. And when I was finishing that up, I was like, okay, I've liked grad school so far. Why don't I just keep doing this again? I'll just stay in school forever. So I applied to a few different grad school programs, all in completely different sort of fields, different animals. The only real defining feature was that it was sort of biomechanics, right? Like the mechanisms and movements of life, of living animals. So I think one of them was looking at the swimming behavior of fish. One of them would have been looking at the movement behavior of either maybe turtles or, birds. One of them was looking at the movement behavior of spiders, which I am deathly afraid of spiders. And this was a super cool lab. They do really awesome research, but they have a room with 100 bird-eating spiders.
What?
That are like the size of a dinner plate. And
like the ones they have in Australia?
Yeah, they're like growing them,
getting
them ready to study.
Hell no.
And I mean, I remember I went and visited, and they were kind of showing me the little room, and I remember walking in and going, nope, I don't think I can do this. And the professor, was really like super excited, talking to me about, like all the different research we can do with these spiders. And, she was telling me that, we had one in the tank the other day, and apparently these spiders can swim along the surface of the water. So they're interested in studying that. But, swimming spiders is just great. I love that concept.
That sounds like a nightmare.
And yeah. And she's like, one of the spiders kind of like flicked itself a little bit. And then I realized that I had some hives breaking out on the side of my face. Apparently the spider had like flicked some little hairs onto her, and that's what they do. And then it causes hives, which is terrible. So that was, would have been a super cool research project to look at. And it's biomechanically, it's really interesting because they have 8 legs, and like what happens, because these spiders can regrow legs. So if one of the legs is removed in some way, then how does the animal compensate? And then when it grows back, what does it do? So there's a lot of cool like neural things you can do with that, and just mechanics. But it's 100 bird-eating spiders in a room, and I can't be there. So that was a cool one that I just could not take that opportunity.
What the actual fuck?
So that was a lot.
You got to know your limits.
That is very, very far past.
I think that would push a lot of people's limits.
Yeah. Snakes and spiders? No, sir.
Snakes? I'd be even fine with snakes. It's just, spiders and... Oof. But
I'll take spiders over snakes any day. I'm sorry. You ain't got no arms and legs, and you're still moving fast as fuck. No, thank you.
We've had some spiders here. We haven't had any snakes yet, but we had a spider outside that was probably that big. Just, my partner, she was, sitting out on the back porch, and it's covered. And all of a sudden you look up and there's like this big spider, like coming down from the ceiling right over her head. I'm like,
This is just Charlotte. Come to say salutations.
Don't love it.
See, if you can kill it with a flip flop or a chancla, we're good. You can't do that with a snake.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. You got to like pick them up by the tail and throw them or something. Yeah.
Not even that. Nope. You just walk the other way. If it's in your house, you burn the house down.
Yeah, just throw the house away.
Yeah. Whole house. Goodbye.
Yeah.
I think Hawaii actually doesn't have any snakes.
That I was going to say that earlier. I don't think they do, and that's one of the things that they're really cautious about. Is any it's why a lot of pets go through quarantine when they're brought from the mainland, is because they're trying to prevent certain species from being able to populate on the island, and especially snakes too. Like I couldn't imagine what snakes would do to the Hawaiian ecosystems. Like there's just so many things that seem like they would be vulnerable to snakes, and people would freak out. Like, could you imagine snakes in Honolulu? Like that just sounds like the start of a horror movie.
It would definitely not be good, especially for I think the seabirds are already feeling a lot of pressure from like the rat population and the cat population. There's a lot of cats, and I think a lot of feral wild cats living here now, little colonies, and I think that's not really.
And tons of chickens.
But there's chickens everywhere.
The chicken population would be wiped out if there were snakes.
Yeah, there are so many chickens. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, so no snakes, but we do have, what do we have? We have spiders. We have cockroaches, a lot of cockroaches, or palmetto bugs for whoever wants to make it sound less terrifying. A lot of cockroaches. We've been very fortunate. We haven't gotten any cockroaches inside of our house yet. We've been very diligent to make sure that does not happen. But then there's a lot of lizards too, little tiny lizards, which we think might be eating the cockroaches, but we have no evidence to support that.
Go lizards. Team lizard over here.
Everywhere. You'll see something kind of scurrying out of the corner of your eye, and you're like, oh no, it's a cockroach, and you look and it's just a little lizard. You're like, it's fine. It's kind of cute.
You're gonna start tagging lizards.
Right.
Little micro
really
tags.
Tiny tag. Yeah. I think the
we were in sync.
The what is it for a tag? The conventional wisdom is it needs to be less than 5% of the animal's body weight. So I think it would need to be literally like half a grain of rice that you put on that little creature. Yeah.
Someone needs to engineer that nanotechnology.
Right.
I'm sure it's out there for like mice and stuff.
Yeah, they have them for birds. They have really, really, really tiny tags that you can put on like sparrows, like little birds that you can get these tiny little tags that can get their motion and all kinds of stuff, which is really cool.
What a crazy world we live in.
You put one on a spider. See where that goes.
Nope. Someone else can do that.
Either. So that's my whole thing. It's like if someone wants to do that, that sounds great. If they like spiders, it's just not going to be what I want to do.
The only way you'll convince me to ever do something like that is if I knew at the end of the day I was going to become Spider-Man.
That's fair. That's fair. Even still, it's like you gotta bite me with a spider to let that happen.
That's why I look at opportunity cost. If I get cool powers and if I get like so mad I could go yeet a car and it just takes one bite, then okay, yeah, it's worth it.
So anyway, I did not take that job. That did not appeal to me. But luckily, the last place I applied to was Stanford, which at the time I was like, I'm not going to get into, I'll apply. It seems fun. It seems like relevant. And the lab was looking at using these biologging tags to study large whales. So everything from minke whales up to blue whales. So including humpback, fin, say, broodies, whatever, whatever you can think of. So
at this point, were you sad to leave, the dog world?
Well, I hadn't really. So I'd been in the dog world during undergrad, and I actually, when I was in Pennsylvania for my master's, my advisor there, Dr. Fish, he was interested in swimming, but he was also interested in just like biomechanics in general and movement and stuff like that. So he's like, let's go to the Pennsylvania Dog Show. Is it the AKC or the Eukanuba? I don't remember which one it is, but they have like a big dog show in Eastern Pennsylvania every year.
It's like the Westminster. Oh no, that's in New York. That's the one in New York.
Is that the one in New York? Yeah.
The one on like Animal Planet.
One. Yep. But this one is like on TV. Like they have that here too. There's like a big room in the back that's like the showroom.
Is that like where the dogs do like the long jumps and the high jumps and the obstacle courses and stuff?
No, they didn't really have obstacle courses at this one. It was more just like who has the prettiest, best version, best specimen of the breed type of thing.
Pedigree.
Yeah, exactly. But it was kind of interesting because Frank was interested in what is the weight distribution in dogs of different sizes. So do large dogs, you kind of have like Spike from Looney Tunes, who's like all upper body and has like a tiny little back end, this big collar. And, then you have little dogs where it's like maybe a little more even. And so what we did is we went to this, big convention center where there was hundreds of dogs and all of their owners. And we would walk up to people with 2 scales and put the scales down and be like, hi, do you want to help us with this research project? Could you have your dog stand on these scales? So like, what's the weight on the front end? What's the weight on the back end versus the dog's complete weight? So we went there for, I think, maybe 2 or 3 years. So that was really fun. We got to just hang out with a bunch of dogs again. So that was kind of the last time I've been in the dog world, but it was cool. It was, a little sad to leave, but the marine world is very fun, very interesting. There's a lot to be done there. And it's so unexplored in so many ways. And it's really difficult to work in the marine environment in so many cases. Like it can be hard to just even get out on the water to see things, that it feels really cool when you can go out and like actually get some really cool data about an animal that spends 99% of its life either underwater or 100 miles offshore or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a privilege.
It's really cool. Yeah. So
And it's almost like a luck thing. You almost got to just be lucky and have a good wind behind you.
Exactly.
That's perfect segue into our next little topic here of wild stories. And when it comes to going out on the water and creating these experiences and searching for these animals, what are some of the wild experiences that you've encountered, not only with your team, but maybe as an undergrad or just the whole gamut? What's some interesting stuff that's happened out there? And don't tell me you have a list next to you.
There are a lot, especially with the tagging, because you have to put the tags out, which can be kind of crazy, and then you have to get the tag back, which without fail is like 5 times crazier.
What, receiving, like going and retrieving the tags?
Going and actually recovering the tags. Yeah. Oh, it's way crazier. And it's, I'm at least in the lab here, I'm one of the, people who knows how to do that the best, which means when there's a really crazy tag recovery that needs to happen, I'm usually the one that's like, Will, go out on the boat, you do this. And I'm there like, 60 miles offshore in like,
in a
10-foot swell, yeah, with my little antenna trying to like find, sitting out in the ocean. You're looking for like a little thing. Exactly. So we have some crazy ones there. So, I mean, just going through the ones we've had in Hawaii, we had one where I had to fly over from Maui to Molokai and get on a boat with a fisherman over there.
That's the uninhabited island, right? Or very low local inhabitants only?
I think no. Well, it's. I think there's maybe like 7,000 people living there. It's not very inhabited, but it's definitely more local. I think it's the island that for a long time in history, I think they had a leper colony living there on the island, which I think was a little bit of a kind of a colonial relic.
That's pretty wild.
A leper colony, like of leprechauns?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yes.
That's wild. I didn't even know
this
that.
island's magically delicious.
Yeah, but so that's I had to fly over there and get on a boat with a fisherman who we had just met with a little plastic bag filled with, I think it was $1,500 in cash that I was supposed to give him. to pay for our journey. And then we got out to where the tag was supposed to be. And he informed me that, yes, that is where the tag is, because this is where my friend found it this morning. I was like, wait, your friend found the tag? He's like, yeah. But he was going to go up fishing. So I told him to just put it back in the water and we'll be out here later. It's like, wait, so you already had the tag so we're out here recovering this tag. Okay, cool.
It sounds like some sort of Facebook marketplace scam.
It was like, close. And then
walking around with a bag of cash.
Yeah, and we went fishing in the afternoon there. So I helped him fish, which growing up I never really fished very much, but here I am like slinging mahi off a hook into a little bin on the boat, and we would swell and everything, and it's getting a little bit dark, and I've already missed my first flight and my second flight and maybe the last flight of the evening because we might not get back in time, and we did not get back in time. So that was a fun day. And then we had a tag wash up on Lanai, so that's the island that is owned 99% by Larry Ellison from Oracle. So we had a tag wash up on the beach. So we had to go out over on the ferry, me and one of my lab mates, and we drove across the island, went down to the beach, found the tag in like 10 minutes. It was like the easiest, recovery ever, which meant that we just had the whole rest of the day to hang out at the Four Seasons beach, which was great. So that was like...
That sounds horrible. What a horrible day of work.
That was the second recovery from that same field season. So I was like, you know what? I deserve this. I'm going to sit on the beach all day. We had one that shot 60 miles offshore off Lanai. So we had to get on a big whale watching boat. And basically, I think we found the tag at like 5:30 p.m. as it was getting dark. And so we had to turn around, come back again, about 60 miles back to Lanai. And I think that took us until 10:30 p.m. or no, Oof. 11, 12, something like that. It was like 6 or 7 hour ride back, just like in the dark, bombing up and down through these waves that you really can't see. And the headlights, I think, on the boat weren't really working properly. And so we just didn't really have any light out there. And so we're just kind of going blind through these waves. And the captain was like, oh, it's fine. I was in the Navy. And, typically when you're driving boats in the Navy, you don't have any of your lights on anyway. We're like, oh, well, why is that? He's like, well, you don't really want to give away your position. I'm like, okay, so I guess it's good that you're the one driving the boat right now while we're like 50 miles offshore in the middle of
pitch
the night.
black.
This is cool. This is great. And we're just sitting there like trying not to get seasick, sort of rocking back and forth on this giant boat that's swelling. And all you can see is like a little bit of stars off the horizon to sort of orient yourself.
Meanwhile, Captain's got like a really smoked cigar like down to his nose.
Exactly.
This is just Tuesday night.
This is normal. So that was a good one. We had one, the first tag we put on a false killer whale. It popped off and floated 30 miles north of Oahu, which meant that I had to get on a 70-foot fishing yacht charter at about 5 in the morning out of Honolulu. And we had to go from Honolulu all the way around the island and then all the way north, 30 miles north, to get the tag. So we left at 5:30 in the morning, got to the tag at like 1:30 in the afternoon, and then we had to come back. And I think we got back to Honolulu at 12:30 in the morning. So I think it was like a 19-hour trip there and back to get that one tag. So the recoveries can be kind of wild, especially in Hawaii, because the weather is...
Do you have to dive in the water for them, or
No.
Do you have like a retrieval device you just can like... That's another big ass stick.
It's a bigger stick.
Or a net.
Yeah, so the tag will float at the surface, and there's two little antenna floating out. So there's one that's a satellite antenna, which basically gets us like a rough position. And then we have a radio where we have this little, like, we call it a yagi, and it's like this little radio antenna that you're sitting there like trying to listen, and there's like wind, and you're trying to figure out where it is, and you can pinpoint the direction. And so that'll get you in visual range, so you can actually see the tag. and it's sitting there floating at the surface. And so you just have to somehow get it out of the water. So hopefully you have a little net on board that you can use to scoop it. But if you don't, sometimes you got to you don't get in the water, but you got to like reach for it a little bit more than maybe you'd want to. But
do you ever get in the water and do a lot of in-water work, especially with the larger animals? I mean, I would assume not, but
not really. No. I think partially just sort of from like a permitting standpoint, it's, you know, you just, we are permitted to do very particular things around these animals. We're permitted to do our tagging and, you know, flying a drone over the animal and being in close proximity for photo ID and things like that. But we're not permitted for anything in water. So we typically, and also it's, you know, we're so busy trying to get these tags on and then get them back that as cool as it would be to be in the water with the animals, we just, it's almost not even on our minds.
Yeah. I've heard different answers to that question. Some it's a respect thing. Some it's just, we don't have it on, you know, like you said, it's not on our minds. Some are just like, hell no, you think I'm getting in the water with a, you know, 80-foot blue whale?
That's definitely it too. That's it. Probably more so for me personally. You know, the thought of being in the water with even a 50-foot animal that can move around me very easily, and I'm just like treading water, trying to stay alive. You know, there's a little bit of what is it, thalassophobia about that?
Yeah,
probably. Yeah. But yeah, so we typically stay in the boat, but there, what is it, up in Alaska? So sort of the other side of a lot of our field work is tagging animals up in Alaska. And so what we'll be doing up there is tagging animals that are bubble net feeding. So bubble net feeding is basically when it's only done by humpback whales, as far as we know, and they'll use bubbles to create a ring or multiple rings around their prey to sort of consolidate them together. And then they come up in the middle, and either they're feeding by themselves or they're going to feed in a big group. And when they're in the big group like that, that's typically when you see those like really spectacular images in nature documentaries where like 15 animals come to the surface. So there was one year we were up there trying to tag animals in a group like that, so as many as we could find. And so what you have to do is you sort of follow along after the animals. So they'll all come up to the surface, and then they kind of mill around for a little bit, and then they go back down. And then a few minutes later, they'll come up again. Typically, they're going to be kind of in a line. And you know that they're coming up because there's a feeding call that they do. They make this really kind of high-pitched, and they do that for a minute or two.
So you're saying you speak whale?
Yes, exactly. In this one instance, yes.
Dinner bell.
And so you can kind of listen for that. And if you can hear it, you're like, oh, okay, they're pretty close by. And so we were, you know, one day we were out there and we're sort of following along. And then we try to get ahead of one of the groups a little bit. And so we're sitting there in the boat, and the boat, the hull is, you know, aluminum, so it'll sort of transmit some of the sound up. So even if the animal's farther away, you'll still kind of hear that sound, that vocal cue. And so we start to hear it, and we're like, okay, you know, they're coming up somewhere nearby, you know, it'll be pretty close. And then we start to hear it, and it's louder and louder and louder and louder. And we're like, okay, they're going to be really close. Oh boy. And then at the very end, they sort of pitch down. So it goes, and then they all break the surface. So we start to hear that, and we're like, okay, they're going to be really close. And then we start to see bubbles form around the boat. and we're sitting there, we're like, oh no. And then like 10 mouths just come right out of the surface, like around the boat. And I mean, they know we're there, so they know not to hit the boat. Like they're very conscious of their bodies and sort of what's around them. But, you know, we just happened to be where their food was. So they were just like, hey, we're going to keep going. And so we got it on a GoPro video. We have two different GoPro video perspectives. We have one from Lars Bider, my current boss, my PI here in the MERP lab. And he was out on the little pulpit, which is like a little graded floor, but it's out off the edge. So you can kind of get a little more leverage for tagging. So he's up there with a little head GoPro mount looking straight down like into the mouth of these whales.
Are we allowed to use this footage to overlay it over the
I don't
story?
know if we can.
That would be so cool to show.
And then we have a GoPro mounted on the back of the boat that's just kind of like looking forward at everything that's happening. And so Andy Szabo is the head of Alaska Whale Foundation. So he's the one up there that we've been collaborating with. And so he's driving the boat. And then there's me and one of the interns. And the whales all start to come up. And there's a moment when I thought I was about to die. And so I looked back at the camera to make sure that it was running. And so my face is just like, as like 10 whales are coming out of the surface. And so that was like absolutely the closest I've ever gotten to these animals. And
that's crazy.
Terrifying, but very, very cool. And again, they know you're there. So it's not like they're oblivious or they're going to hit the boat or anything like that, but they're just like, they are like 3 feet from you. And it's just this mouth that's as big as the boat. So that was, that was pretty cool. We, weren't in the water, but pretty close to them. Yeah. So we've had a lot of kind of crazy, and then, there's just us being out there, things happen. So there was one time when we sort of had to stay out because the field station that we were staying at was like 50 miles away. And so we didn't want to have to go all the way back and then come back out the next day. So we just stayed on a little dock. We like camped on a little dock, me and Lars. And we were just going to like grab the tag the next morning and bring it back. And Andy was like, oh, the dock's like, it's a good little dock. It's been there for a while. It'll be fine. So Lars and I get around and we look at the dock and we realize that it's like half an inch above the water line. And so if you step on the dock, it just like sinks under the water line a little bit. And so that's where we camped for the night. So there's things like that. And then, the engine broke one time when we were 40, 50 miles away from home. We had to get towed by a big boat back to like another little town that was not where we were staying, and then had to get towed back the next morning. And so
that's the worst, breaking down at sea.
Yeah, that was, and we were like right next to shore. So we were like going into shore, and the island that we were next to is the island with, I think, the highest density of brown bears in the world. So we're like, well, we don't really want to be like stuck on this shore with the bears for the next 6 hours. Yeah. So just, not even whale related, but just like things that happen when you're out there. So
it's exactly why we started this show, to be able to tell those stories, even though they might not be specific to the animals that each individual is working with. But there's conservation stories that are all interconnecting that are pretty damn crazy at the end of the day.
Especially when you have hundreds of tag deployments, every single deployment is an adventure, I'm sure. And I'm also sure you're probably going to remember some stories that you didn't think of on the show afterwards, which is fine. Absolutely. We'll come back for part 2 later on.
Sounds good.
But no, it's really good to get insight into, the people behind these types of conservation efforts and really try to find your voice. What we try to do here at Wildscape is really just pass you the mic and say, hey, you're human. You got all these things going on. You're doing really cool things. Kind of just let us take a peek into that life and let you tell that story. So thank you for sharing, all of that. That's a very interesting journey to be where you are now, which is a great jumping off point to, the future. What does the future look like for Will and your organization and, the whales that you study?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm I think just finishing up my first year here in Hawaii. And so I'm here for at least 2 more years. So, we've sort of started this process of bringing in this tag data and really getting it ready for analysis and use. So we're going to sort of keep going on that. So we've got a few different, papers and things like that in the works. And, a big part of that is training people not just in the MERP lab, but within Hawaii more generally, on sort of how to use this data. So that's a big reason that I'm here. Sort of what I'm being funded to do is sort of the idea of building capacity with these tags in Hawaii. But then the lab more broadly, there's a lot of work that is sort of starting to come out now, right? So I think that we have a few grad students at the moment who are, maybe in their fourth and fifth, maybe sixth years. So they're sort of starting to really, get some really cool results and starting to sort of finish up some of their analyses and get that out. So there's a lot to do with droning, UAV drone work. So there's a paper that just came out by one of the grad students, Fabien Vivier. And so he was looking at the age structure, the different age classes within a group of dolphins. So, different things you can do with drones. So there's a lot with drones, a lot with tags, sort of getting into the interplay between those two different methodologies, a lot with sort of surveying, population surveys, things like that like Claire was talking to you guys about. So really kind of trying to meld all of these different methodologies together and really get a more sort of holistic sense for what these animals are doing, what's the health of individual animals, populations, things like that. So that's really sort of the continuing mission of the MMRP lab.
That's awesome from an organizational standpoint. It's really cool to see kind of a peek into the future and what you guys are working on.
Yeah, and you got your work cut out for you.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot to do. Being a postdoc is really fun. It's definitely a lot different than being a grad student, just from the sense of, if you're a grad student, you're sort of working on one thing, more or less. It can be multifaceted, multi-tendrilled, but it's still sort of like one thing. Whereas when you're a postdoc, it feels a little more like, okay, here's this little piece I'm working on, and here's this little project that's a little bit separate, and then here's something that I'm helping out this person, and you're sort of you're pulled in a few more directions, and you have more agency in some ways and a little bit less in others, which is kind of fun.
That's very unique. Yeah. Can you kind of touch base on some tips maybe for the listeners out there, after sharing your journey and, explaining how you got to where you are? What are some good tips for people that may want to get into the space of conservation and maybe postdoc for that matter?
Obviously my perspective will be, very biased and sort of colored. But I think if an opportunity presents itself for something that you don't know if you would really enjoy it yet, I think something that's always been really helpful for me was sort of figuring out what I didn't want to do more than what I did want to do. Because trying to figure out what I did want to do, it's like, there could be 15 different things here. I don't know exactly which one I want to pick. But if I would try something and didn't like it, then I'm like, okay, well, at least I know that I don't want to do this. This is really cool. Someone will love to do it. It's just not really my thing. And then I could sort of whittle down from there. So, at the moment, I love whales. Whales are amazing. But, if I went into another postdoc or got an academic position or industry position or something like that was not working with whales, but it was still sort of related, or I could use some of those same skills, I could definitely have fun with that. I could see being open to that. So I think, yeah, that definitely helped me sort of, whittling down the list of things that you really decide aren't for you.
Yeah, try it and see what you don't like. And once you don't like it, that makes that kind of pool to choose from even smaller and easier to identify what you can do in the future.
Right.
Exactly.
I definitely don't think that's biased. You've probably one of the first people on our show that have told it like that, which is a great perspective. because it's true, you try it, you don't like it, and then you're like, well, now I know I didn't waste 2 years trying that or going full force for it. You're kind of test driving it before you buy it, kind of thing.
Well, and you
um
learn something from everything that you do. There's a positive spin on it. Even if it was something that you didn't like, well, now hey, I don't like this. I'm not going to do this anymore, and it's one step closer to finding something that I do like and can do long term.
that's true. And on the off chance, you're always going to be building a network through the things that you try, through the stepping stones that you step on. That's a new resource, that's a new connection in your network that could, maybe come full circle in the future. And you could be, business partners, or end up collaborating, or end up on a project together. There's just so many ways to open the doors, in any space. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. um, so Will, is there a way that our listeners and the audience can kind of get involved with MMRP?
There are definitely, a lot of data sets that we need help with, help processing, help looking through. Um, so, if you're interested in anything that I've been talking about at all, uh, you can just contact me. You can get my email address. And
What is that,
yeah,
by the way?
my email address is wgough, so WGOUGH at hawaii.edu. Have a Twitter page, which is at Will Gough. So you can contact me there too. Yeah, so we have internships that I think during the summer. I mean, right now we might have 5 to 10 interns in the lab right now helping us out with different projects. So I have someone helping me right now do a literature review on all of the papers that have ever been published using tag deployments to try to figure out how different aspects about those deployments.
Wow.
Claire has interns helping her go through the photo ID photos that she's taken from all of the surveying. One of the grad students, Martin Van Aswegen, is working a lot with drone data. So he has people helping him go through drone data. We have all the tag data that we have people going through and helping us out with different aspects. So it's really, we collect all this data, and then it's way, 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 way more than, a single person or even 10 people can get through in a reasonable amount of time. So we definitely need help. And then there's also, if you're at the high school level, there's a program that two of the grad students have been running for the last 2 years. So it's
We're familiar with that.
Yep, Smile
Yep.
is the program. I think Claire might have been talking about it a little bit. So that's a great way for people to get into it, and that's an avenue where you'll get to sort of experience hopefully a whole bunch of different sort of styles of marine research. And it's not just like you're going to sit in the lab with us and go through tag data. It's like you're going to learn about tagging, about droning, about surveying. You're going to go out and do a survey. You're going to maybe go and get to meet people from NOAA. You're going to meet people from Dolphin Quest, and I think they might even be able to
Maybe even next year you'll meet people from Wildscape.
There you
wink,
go.
Wink, wink.
That would be great. That would be wonderful. Yeah, so there's that program has been going for the last 2 years, and that's a really, really good way for people to get involved. Definitely.
Yeah, that program is phenomenal from what we've seen, and something that we really appreciate. And that's essentially why we do this segment at the end of every show is for people who are interested in becoming a part of programs or just learning more, that they have a way to do so, and a program that's built specifically for high schoolers who, let's be honest, most high school educations aren't very well, built towards a career in marine biology or educating people on how to even get to that point. So having a purpose-built program from the people that work in it every day is fantastic.
Definitely.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap the episode. We appreciate your time, Will. This was a great one, and we're looking forward to putting out there and everyone giving it a listen.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Sweet. Thanks, Will. We'll see you soon. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Wild and Unprotected podcast, brought to you by Wildscape Productions. Follow us on social media at Wildscape Productions. For more information on our documentary series, Shoreline Stories, visit wildscapeproduction.com. Stay tuned for our future episodes, as we have so much more in store for Wild and Unprotected.